We are live, and today we're going to talk about the Department of Education. There were 1,300 employees that were just told on Tuesday night that they were being let go. And I have Holden from Classroom Camp here to talk to me about it. Anything you want to say before I get started about this?
I will just say that if you're an educator, I don't think that there is a more exciting time in recent history to be an educator because there's a lot of stuff going down and I'm excited to talk about it. And thank you for having me on.
No problem. So, if you don't know his channel, he talks about a lot of different teacher in the news stories. So let me, so this is brand new. This kind of news is like, it changes by the minute. So here's something very new just happening, is that a bunch of states, Democratic states, sue Trump over major cuts to the Department of Education. So there's a new lawsuit from attorneys in 20 states and the District of Columbia about the mass layoffs. And let me share another article. So if you didn't know that on Tuesday night, 1,300 employees were let go. Oh, sorry for the ad. We knew that this was coming. You know, he campaigned on closing it, so this is not really a surprise. But Education Department closes DC office Wednesday. More than 1,300 employees learned that they've been fired. So let's start with initial thoughts. What do you think of that so far?
There is a lot going on, and it seems like it's been one story after another because I talked about several weeks ago that the Trump administration had forced the Department of Education to cut, I think it was around $600 million in funding that was going to different teacher programs and grants, things of that nature, which allegedly are related to DEI efforts. And the article that you pulled up there about being sued relates to that because what ended up happening now is a federal judge put a temporary halt on those cuts to funding. And states are eight states got together and requested this, I believe. And basically, states not having their funding is causing some layoffs and teachers to lose their jobs, things like that, because they are not able to get into these teacher preparation programs. So there's kind of been a trickle effect culminating into what you're talking about with people being laid off at the DOE.
Hey, all right. Well, I was actually listening to or watching a podcast today, and I left it in the description. Whenever in the past I've shown videos on this channel, sometimes they get demonetized, so I'm not going to show the video. But Ben Shapiro was talking about how the DOE's biggest thing that they do is actually the Pell Grants and different grants for colleges. And that's one of the main things they do. And a lot of people think it's like K through 12. But he made the point that actually the Pell Grants have made, and all of those college loans through the government have actually made college prices go up, because it's like with insurance. It's like doctors' offices charge more if they know you have insurance because they want to charge the insurance company. So it's kind of like that. It's like, oh, we could get money from the government, we'll start charging more, and it's kind of driven the prices of college up. So that's one kind of area, that maybe I didn't think about before watching the video. And a lot of people think it does have more to do with K through 12, but it is a lot of college loans and grants and stuff that the Department of Education does. And real quick, I showed this already. I want to say hi to Rebecca. Thanks for coming. So what do you think of that aspect?
Well, I think that, like you said, people do focus mostly on K through 12 because the issue at hand that people are concerned mostly about is public education. And they believe that public education is being attacked, and I heard some people say that it's being destroyed. Now, yes, there are a lot of unintended effects, as it seems, and like you said, um, the funding has caused college prices to rise. And I think that, yeah, these types of things are so unpredictable, especially this, because from what I understand, this isn't the first time that the government has considered shutting down the DOE. And I believe that I think it was 1981, Ronald Reagan came up and proposed this,
Yes.
something like this.
Hmm.
So a lot of people are speculating on or and saying this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is this. But as you said here, who would have predicted? I guess that prices would have gone up. Maybe somebody said it, but we really don't know how all of this is going to play out in the long run.
Yeah, what I think what people don't realize is that your state Department of Education, so maybe that would be the Virginia state, for you the Louisiana State Department of Education, has a lot more to do with your day-to-day in the classroom than the federal government. And yeah, there have been talks because the Department of Education was set up in 1979, so 1981 would have just been a couple of years later. So there have been talks to get rid of it since it started, but a lot of people make the argument that since in the 50 years that the Department of Education has been around, math and reading scores have actually gone down. So how do we people are saying it's helping and it's going to hurt when it doesn't go away, at least in that aspect, and I'll get to some other aspects of it in a minute. I mean, what do you think about that?
This is my thought, and people may disagree with me on this, but I think that, empirically, when something becomes too available, it loses its luster a little bit. Um, and I think that that has become the case with um, with public education. And I think that the value of education has gone down, is what it comes down to. And I think that the Department of Education does have some effect on that. The standardized testing, just making moves like that to make equality or equity in education. And I'm not saying that those are bad things necessarily, but I just think that that is what's happened, is that trying um to make everyone on an even playing field has actually kind of made scores much worse, in my opinion. you know
Right.
uh yeah, there's a lot that could be said on that. So
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to say more, go ahead. But
no, no, I'll just, I'll wait. Yeah,
okay.
again, we see this with a lot in a lot of different areas, because I think we talked previously about how, for example, the teachers, we have a teacher shortage, and the quality of teachers has gone down. It's not just um education itself. It's just there are a lot of things that moving parts that have all just come together to kind of like lower the quality and value of the system. I think that with college in the past, you a bachelor's degree was a lot. It meant a lot. People say that. And nowadays it's like bachelor's degree, like, what's the big deal? It's like expected. It's not something that is like, exciting. It's just kind of like a matter of fact type thing. Now you got to go and get a master's. But, so that is, I think that education has definitely, the quality has gone down. And whether or not the Department of Education has a huge part to play in that, I do think the standardized testing, things like that, do. And with the Department of Education, I think that they have some sway in that, a huge sway in that, as a matter of fact. So,
Yeah, so okay, so much to unpack there. So let me start with colleges. So actually the video that I left in the description about from Ben Shapiro today, he was making the point that now so many people are getting bachelor's degrees, and it used to be for only for certain fields you needed it, that now even fields where you really don't need it, like you could just start working after college, like it's become expected, or it's become like everybody has to have one. So you're right about that. I think it's kind of muddied the waters. And I think there is more of a push now people are giving more the advice now, only go to college for the degrees where it's going to help you get a job, or don't just get a degree just to get a degree or go into all that debt. But then some other things you said, standardized testing. So if you're going to federalize education, meaning you're going to make one set standard for all of the United States, which is more of what the federal Department of Education is doing, then you have to test kids to make sure that child in New York City is on the same page and the same standard as that kid in rural Louisiana. So I feel like standardized testing, Common Core, not all states have Common Core, and it wasn't something that you had to do, but the federal Department of Education had Common Core and strongly suggested that states adopt it, which a lot of states did. Mine didn't, but and people hate it. That's what teachers complain about that. And No Child Left Behind was another one that came from the Department of Education, which teachers hate as well. So I just brought up 3 things that teachers complain about that comes from federalizing education. And the one argument is that, so you're going to put it back to the states, meaning the states decide this, which, like I was saying at the beginning, your state Department of Education has a lot more to do with your day-to-day. I bet, in meetings you go to, you're hearing much more things about your state Department of Education and most people never even thought about the federal Department of Education until they found out Trump was going to close it. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Any thoughts on what I just said?
Definitely. So you pointed out that the Department of Education is responsible for a lot of things, several policies and ideas that teachers do not like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching a video earlier, and I'm trying to see who was in that video. It was a civil rights lawyer, attorney for the Department of Education. Brittany Coleman was her name. She said, this is just in summary. She said, "We're the experts in determining how to distribute funding." All right. Now, we know, for example, that the Department of Education delves out funding and especially for special services and things, which are great. But you have a civil rights attorney. That type of attitude is the bureaucratic attitude that teachers, in my opinion, and personally, I can't get on board with. Those 13, we have a lot of people in the education system, probably some in the Department of Education, who are bureaucrats who may have never set foot in a classroom in their entire life. And so I personally feel more comfortable having people within the states that are closer to the classroom handle issues within the state. So that's my take on that. But yeah.
Yes, great points. And I feel the same way. I feel like your state is going to know much more about your state. And just like I said, people live differently. We have 50 states and we all live so differently. And schools are going to be run differently. And even me, within different counties, are run differently within my state. So I totally agree that, yeah, it's going to be bureaucrats. And that's what a lot of the federal Department of Education is. It's so far removed from your day-to-day, and people are saying, well, that'll make schools go down. They have not much to do. Now, I've said this also in some of my car chats, but not everybody watches. My only kind of hesitation in completely getting rid of it, though, is how they work with special education. So my understanding is the states are still going to get the funding for special education, just they're not going to have the oversight from the federal Department of Education on how those funds are being spent. So some states will do fine with that and some may not. I was listening to a newscast today where they were saying, well, what if just that part of it you moved to somewhere else, like Health and Human Services? I know that Head Start is funded through the Department of Health and Human Services, not the Department of Education, like a lot of people think. And if you don't believe me, go look it up. So yeah, I agree. I think why we've never really wanted we didn't even have a Department of Education until 1979. We went through 2 world wars, and and people were still being educated during that time. So, yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, like you said, the states are still supposed to be getting access to those funds. And as I mentioned, the civil rights attorney, her position on that was that, well, we know how to distribute those funds best. And I don't necessarily think that that is the truth. And I think that there are competent people within the states who can handle this situation, and how to distribute funding. And we have seen through history that when one thing goes away, something else pops up. Like you said, moving it to another agency, or um, maybe the creation of a new agency within the states. And I also think that this is going to be a situation where the states are going to rely on each other more than ever, because I listened to a speech by Trump talking about it, which he made a point about how, well, there are some states where the education system seems to be doing really well, and I think that other states will, maybe those that aren't so well off, will take inspiration possibly from those states and adopt some of those same measures to boost their system. So yeah, I don't think I can understand, because right now you got 1,300 people that lost their jobs. It's unfortunate. However, it does happen in other industries, and it's not anything new. It's just now that it's the Department of Education, and we're all like, well, what's the next step? Are they just going to get rid of it completely? But I think that there is going to be someone able to come in and fill the gap, or fill the hole um, that is needed. And we don't know what all of the unintended effects of this are going to be. We don't know how all this is going to play out. And I think that a lot of people are scared, but at this point, I think we need to try to look behind the what's that, the trees in the forest. We can't see the forest for the trees. I think we need to try to have some long-term thinking, maybe a growth mindset, if you will.
Way to use teacher words. um, yeah, so you every state already does have a Department of Education, so you already have a state Department of Education, and more decisions that affect your day to day are made at that level. And I made this point before too, but if you are not happy as a citizen, as a parent, as a teacher, if you're not happy with how things are going, it's easier to go advocate at the state and local level than it would be to go to DC, especially if you don't live near DC, to try to advocate at your federal department. And then it all trickles down till it gets to you. So I think if you have a state that is not doing well with how it's using the funding, is not doing well with special education, that's where you, the citizen, need to step up, go to the school board meetings, write to your state Department of Education. If the problem is special education, get together with other special education parents, form a committee, go advocate. Again, much, much, much easier to do at the state and local level, much easier to do to actually see changes at the state and local level.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that you make a great point about how families can get more involved in education, go to the school board meetings and advocate for their children, which is, something that definitely needs to be done. And that's possibly one of the unintended effects is, it's a positive effect, but we didn't really see it coming, that, well, now parents are more involved. And I definitely think that, um, so I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State now, and I think it was recently, but he wrote a letter along with several other senators, I believe, to the Department of Education, urging them to get rid of some restrictions that they were planning to impose on charter schools. And so there's a lot at play here. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, I think.
So
Because
what restrictions did they have on charter schools?
I believe it had something to do with funding. Something to
Okay.
do with funding. Let me see here if I have that. Um,
Okay, because they were only funding public schools, or I mean, some charter schools are public schools, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
yes, yes. Trying to
Okay.
find it here in my
That's okay.
notes.
Yeah, and so I do want to make the point too is that Trump can't completely close the Department of Education without Congress. He needs congressional approval. So there's 535 members of Congress, and the majority of them have to agree with this in order for it to happen. Now, it is a Republican controlled Congress, both the House and the Senate. And the Senate has didn't know the vice president is president of the Senate, so he breaks all the tie-breaking votes. Who is also a Republican, so they do have the votes on the Republican side if they all agreed, but he still has to get Congress to approve. And Congress doesn't do anything without a lot of committees and hearings and debates, and it has to go through both chambers of the House. So this is not like this is going to happen today, although he cut it just 2 days ago. And yeah, I mean, but he can't completely get rid of it without Congress.
Well,
So,
so I don't know if you read the stories on what happened, but there was one interview that I watched. I believe it was the interview with the civil rights attorney, and she basically said that they got an email saying that the Department of Education, the offices were going to be shut down for security reasons. For security reasons.
yeah, I saw that too. See, I understand that, and here's why. Private companies do this too. What happens is if you tell people without, and you let them stay at work, people have been known to like ruin things, go around and like, let's say the IT person finds out they'll destroy the whole computer system. So that happens in private businesses. As soon as you tell someone they're losing their job, you escort them out immediately. So they can't go destroy your computer programs, destroy everything. And they probably also, rightfully so, thought people were going to be upset. And so let's give them a day to cool down. That's my take on why they did it.
And I totally agree with that. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how it went down, and it's like I, from the outside, we've seen, like I said, we saw the funding being cut, and then the next thing was kind of this, and that person was saying that people in the department had been resigning. There had been emails going out, people were resigning, and then all of a sudden now security reasons, and then people are getting emails saying, you're on administrative leave, or whatever the case is. So there's no telling. These things seemingly happen overnight, and I guess that's kind of like the point that I was getting at, like the security reasons, like just suddenly, and then so
Yeah, and I mean, people know it's been coming because he campaigned on it, and they know this has been coming. Actually, I know somebody. She worked in the special education department. She left in December, left to go work, left my school to go work at the Department of Education. I was like, you been watching the news? Really? Why? And probably someone else made a good point. Like, probably the reason that job was open because other people saw the writing on the wall and were quitting. I, I don't, not someone I knew real well or talked to, but I'm going to take a wild guess, especially if she was just hired 2 months ago, that probably she was one of the ones cut. Just crazy. Yeah.
but something else I wanted to say that so this has kind of influenced my thoughts and feelings on this. I recently had to read a book. It's called The Power of Their Ideas by Deborah Meyer.
Okay.
And she worked in New York City. This book was published in 1995, and she worked in New York City with this area or school called Central Park East, which they later also developed Central Park East Secondary School. And these schools were started as small schools within their district but somehow they had negotiated that they were just going to be like the district was going to be hands off for the most part. And they were not going to have to answer to the district. Now, they weren't necessarily charter schools,
I
but they
was
were
gonna
just kind of,
ask.
they
Okay.
weren't really, I mean, I guess that's probably what you would think of them as
Yeah.
these days. But they they did a lot of experimental education. Um, for example, like the to be for high school graduates, they had to have a committee and they had to go in and defend why they should graduate. Just a lot of different things like that. But these schools, they were unregulated, they were free from bureaucracy, and they were on par, if not better, than other schools within the district. And the teachers ran the school. They didn't really have a principal either. They had someone who was the equivalent of a principal, but principal actually comes from principal teacher. The principal used to be the principal teacher. So everyone was a teacher. There was collaboration, worked with families, close relationships. And Meyer in her book advocates for this type of system that I think we're going to end up seeing that sure we're going to have public schools, but we might also have like, the school choice thing going on, but a mix, more opportunities. That's how you could look at it, as more opportunities, and you can make an argument that, well, it's not going to be equitable, and public schools aren't going to be as well funded. It's going to be taken away from them. But I think we need a more balanced education system with more types of opportunities, because at the end of the day, that is differentiation. Um, so that book, definitely recommend The Power of Their Ideas. It's an interesting kind of case study on what could happen if you remove some of that bureaucracy from the schools, which is what we're probably going to be seeing with these all this news about the Department of Education layoffs and whatever is to happen in the future. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That sounds like a really good book. I probably will read it. But I agree because we're just trying to make all schools cookie cutter, and that doesn't, teachers complain all the time like I'm not able to just teach or be creative like I used to because they have these standardized tests, and that would allow. I'm curious, was that a private school? If it wasn't a charter school?
wasn't a private school. It
Okay.
was I forget how. I mean, I forget how they accepted students or what the case was, but it wasn't a charter school, wasn't a private school. Um, but yeah, it was just people call it a fluke, I guess. It was just kind of out there. Um,
Right, but I agree with you because now people are going to have more choices, and you're talking about people getting left behind. Actually, I think school choice actually helps poor people. I think poor people who wouldn't have the choice to choose a private school or of their choice, they wouldn't be able to do it. They're stuck with just whatever zip code they're in. And usually the poorer zip codes don't get the tax dollars and don't have as good of schools, but then they don't have any choice. So I actually think school choice would help. And I've talked before about, I get that it's taken away from the public schools, but what if there was a compromise? I've heard of states doing this. Take half. Let's say it takes $20,000 to educate a kid. What if half of it went to them to decide what school their kid went to, and the other half stayed in the public school? Even that would help. And I also think private schools pay teachers significantly less, but if we had vouchers, that might enable private schools to also pay teachers more. And, then the private schools would get more applicants if they were able to pay more, and also a ripple effect. I feel like that would be better. I feel like there's a reason monopolies are illegal, because when there's no competition, you know, a company can just charge whatever they want, can act however they want, can have bad customer service. And I liked what you said about that one school you were talking about, whatever it was, kind of school it was, but they had to advocate and say why they should graduate. Well, now we've got everybody just passing every person because that principal or that school district doesn't want to be looked at as, oh, we have bad graduation rates, so let's just pass everybody. And I like that they weren't worried about the graduation rate. They're like, are you worthy of this? You got to show me, you got to do the work, you got to show me why and how. And we've seen stories of people like going to college and suing the college and suing their school district because they grew up and couldn't read. So the public school's not doing it right now. It this is the Department of Education is around, so that's not helping with people not being able to read either. So yes, I think competition would be really, really good for everybody. For the school system, the public schools would be like, oh, we're losing a lot of people to private schools. What can we do differently? Uh, Individual citizens who then could decide and don't have to be like, well, I'd love to send my kid to private school, but I can't afford it. And maybe the private schools could pay teachers more, or maybe some of it could go to homeschooling if that's what you choose is best for your family too. You know, the curriculum, or some people want to pay for online programs. So yeah, that's what I think. Which
There are a lot of things that are going to happen, and I think we're going to see a little bit of all of it
yeah,
before all is said and done. Um, and something that I'm really most interested in is how is this going to affect teachers? Because you know, I've thrown out all these possibilities like, well, you know, is teacher pay going to go down? Is teacher pay going to go up? You know, how is this going to affect our, because for example, like the funds that were cut recently that dealt with that were for teacher preparation programs, well, that's, you know, less preparation for teachers. um, are the qualifications, the requirements to become a teacher going to be lower, those standards? How is this going to affect my day-to-day life? And you know, I'm really curious to see what happens in this next school year, because we're at the end here, but
yeah,
this next school year, how is that gonna um but yeah, competition is great. um you know, I work at a charter school right now, and there are a lot of things that I could say. All right, a lot of things that I could say that I just do not necessarily agree with, and
oh, about your charter school.
definitely,
Oh,
and
okay.
and I'm interested to see how that affects charter schools, because when we talk about bureaucracy, see, one thing that I see, and it is a common complaint about teachers who go to charter schools, for example, is um, not being treated as though you're a professional. You know,
Mm.
not being allowed to take risks, to teach to your students, but being mandated to do specific things, this and that. And I think that all of that trickles down from the very top. It trickles down, and removing that bureaucracy of the Department of Education, how is that going to affect the way that, you know, the allowances, you know, what teachers are allowed to do or not allowed to do in the classroom? I'm curious about that. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I think right, it doesn't even have much of an effect right now. Like I said, I think your state Department of Education has always had more of an effect on that. Um, yeah.
well, let me ask you this, because one of the things that I was hearing about is like the federal government, I believe the Department of Education, they do issue Title One funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
So some of that, and maybe that will still exist. You know, they said that they're not necessarily cutting funding; they just got rid of a lot of people. But because I'm not too sure on it, but you know, I don't know if charter schools, how much they depend on funding from the federal government, but that may be something I'll have to research further. But anyways,
Yeah, I'll have to research further. I know that I think they for special education still giving the funding to the states. It's just the states decide. So I'm going to guess, but I don't want to say for sure until I do my research, that it's the same with Title One. So I mean that if they gave it to the states, then the states decide who gets Title One, and that's yeah. But I wanted to make a point about something you said about lowering the standards for teachers and teacher pay and stuff. I have noticed that the lower paying states are the ones that are having more teachers quitting and are having and are having to lower the standards because they have so few teachers. So I guess my point is, again, that goes to the states. It's very much state by state and even county by county. I drive 40 minutes to the next county over to get paid more. So I feel like that again is going to have nothing to do with the federal Department of Education, because they don't decide what individual states and counties pay their teachers. And again, look at the data. It's Texas and Florida both have a lot of teachers quitting and they don't pay well. So that's, again, you need to go advocate at your state level. And I know in Florida, the population is older, so more people are voting on Social Security and they're not voting on the school system. So if you live in Florida and you have a school age kid, you need to get involved and advocate.
Didn't
So
didn't you say you were going to move to Florida?
I thought about it, yes, but my kids are I have a senior this year, so like I'm almost done with that aspect of my life, so I don't have to worry about education. Well, I guess unless I decide to get a teaching job there. But if they don't pay well, I'll do something else because I'm a second career teacher anyway. I was like, okay, nah, I don't like the pay. But the place I'm looking at was okay pay. Yeah, I've already looked it up. Yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you think about the possibly the pop up of like more of these micro schools, these mini micro schools to kind of fill the need? You know, anytime there's a need, something comes up to be filled, and I'm curious about that. You know, whether or not, because I have friends who have talked about starting their own school,
Hmm.
things like that. I know someone who was trying to do something, tried to get me on board a few years ago. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Yeah. I've definitely heard of people trying to do it as well. I think it's a good thing. Like I said, I think choice is good. And if people were allowed to use some of the tax dollars that they already pay for their own child to go to school, if they didn't only have to use it on public school and they could use it wherever they wanted, more people could try these micro schools, meaning also all these teachers that wanted to create the micro schools, they would be more likely to be successful if people also could use their vouchers and their tax dollar money to go there, because you're going to be limited. People are going to say, I don't want to spend the money, or I'll wait, you're a new school, I don't want to take a risk yet, or I'm already, I don't have the money, or I don't want to spend the money. But I think choice would be good. And like you were talking about the creativity, teachers feeling like they can't just teach however they want to teach. More of that, they would be able to do that more if you had more private schools, if you had more micro schools. Charter. I know some charter schools are funded by the government or even your state government, and some aren't. I don't totally know. You could speak on that. But I just feel like people, if they were able to have more choice, then all of these other schools would work. Parents could get the type of education they want for their kids. Teachers would more likely be able to teach the type of education. They could either create the micro school or go work at a private school, which hopefully the salary would go up for private school teachers if that more aligned with their philosophy. So if you're a teacher and really believe in Montessori, go work in a Montessori school and not be like, they don't pay as much as a public school. Forget that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There are many critics who say that the reason the education system, well, I won't say many. I'll just say that I've heard this
Yeah.
said that the reason the education system has gotten the way it is because of public education, because of the standardization and all that. And like we have discussed previously, I think that allowing more options. You mentioned
Hmm.
Montessori,
Hmm.
uh, and just other schools of choice, different types of schools, private schools. Um, I think that those are great options, and
Hmm.
there should be a more diverse opportunities for both teachers and students. You know, what I hear this is what someone in one of these videos that I watched today was. They said that, well, we don't want students are going to be. They said students are going to be going to these private, unregulated schools. And my thing is, you know, who's to say that lack of regulation is bad? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like that, I think that that's actually probably a good thing. We're talking
Right.
about bureaucracy. It's a good thing that they're not, they don't have someone outside the classroom telling them what to do. With charter
Right.
schools, and I can attest to this, is that charter schools have usually a board, a board of trustees or whatever you call them, and the board, a lot of the people on the board have never, they're not even in the field of education.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, they've never taught before, they've never been in a school. All they know is that these are the scores that we need to keep this charter school open. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to see these numbers, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And so that's an issue. So I think that lack of regulation, when people throw it out there like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. And who's to say the parents sending their kids to the school, if they're not happy, then they can bring that up with the school. It's no different than, I know some states are stricter on homeschooling, but in homeschooling, people have the freedom to kind of teach however they want. And not all of them agree. I used to work for OutSchool. And did you say you worked for OutSchool too? I think, no, you said VIP Kid?
No, I worked for some smaller companies, but
Oh, okay.
I'm familiar with the VIP Kid, um,
And OutSchool.
and maybe 51 Talk or something like that.
Oh yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, so at OutSchool, I know I had a lot of homeschooling parents that were or students, so parents that homeschooled that kind of wanted to. My government classes were really popular because I think parents were, you know, wanted something, they outsourced something they couldn't teach. But a lot of them did not want traditional school. And a lot of public school teachers that also taught on OutSchool, if you put public school teacher in your profile, they didn't want it because the reason they homeschooled is because they were trying to get away from traditional school and they were trying to do things differently. So, actually, they wanted someone who had kind of worked in the field. So they liked that I had experience working in government and politics and they liked my classes. So they don't want teachers doing the same thing. They don't want the traditional homework. So, if the parent decides to send their child to that school that's unregulated, as people say, they might want a school that's unregulated. So, and when I did work at a private school, that's one thing I loved is that they gave you a lot of freedom. I mean, they had kind of wide parameters in what you needed to teach, but they didn't tell you how to do it or what, like if I wanted to not go by the book, if I wanted to start on chapter 9, if I wanted to be creative, or if I just wanted to go straight from the book, like I got to do it. So I loved that. So I think teachers would love it too if they got to be more creative. And that comes from getting rid of a bunch of bureaucracy. Like you have to do this. These are the standards. Here's the test. You got to make sure the kids are ready for this standardized test. Yeah.
Right, right. That has really gotten, things like that have kind of removed the creativity from teaching. And I understand in one way why it's done. It's there are so many moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing with the teacher shortage, part of the reason why we have like the ELA curriculum in Louisiana is called guidebooks, and it is like a script. A lot of teachers talk about these scripted curricula. You could, I mean, the guidebooks has everything. It has the slideshow, and it has say this, do this, tell students to, it walks you through. So in a case where you're struggling to find teachers, well, you can just put someone in the classroom and they got a script that they can follow and just,
Yeah.
go up there and do it. But at the same time, you're also mandating that more experienced teachers do that as well. It's it's like a back and forth.
Yeah.
So
I mean, or maybe like the private school is that you had a book you could go by, and if you needed to or wanted to just literally read from the book or go by the book, you could. But then if you wanted to be creative, you could do that too. So, yeah, I kind of like that teachers have the choice, or maybe a brand new teacher who's has all these great ideas and has the time to, but give teachers more creativity and autonomy and see what happens. I'm
right.
guessing you, and teachers keep saying they want that, but the same teacher, some of the same teachers I hear saying they want that also say we shouldn't get rid of the Department of Education. Like, I don't know if you realize what you're really saying, you're asking for more bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy just trickles down federal to now your state to your county. I mean,
Yeah, I was surprised looking over all of this that more than 60%, I want to say it was 68%, but I don't quote me on that, but I know that it's more than 60% of Americans in a poll had said that they were not in favor of getting rid of the Department of Education. And since people are saying since it's such an unpopular idea, and the American people don't want it, well, they're probably not going to get rid of the Department of Education overall. And you know, I'm 60%. I'm curious because before any of this, I never really thought too much about the Department of Education. I mean,
right,
who really just thinks about this kind of
right.
thing and has an opinion on it, has an
No
informed
one,
opinion?
because it has nothing to do with your day to day. Like I said, the Louisiana Department of Education has a lot more to do with your day to day.
I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, who really has thought about this?
no
And
one.
yeah, and I remember I watched a video of yours a while back. You were like saying that you don't really know what's been going on because I think that might be part of the issue is lack of transparency, just not really talking about like what's going on. Have they actually done anything?
Right.
Um, so I don't see this 60%. I'm curious as to who those people actually are.
Well, I think those people are uninformed. Like they think, like I've had people argue with me before, like, oh, well, the kids are acting like this and you want to get rid of the Department of Education. Well, the Department of Education has nothing to do with how kids are acting in an individual school. That's not even what so that won't affect anything.
Yeah.
So, they take care of Pell Grants or give out money to the states, but as far as what's happening in your classroom, in your county, in your state, they don't have a lot to do with it. And I think the 60% are just people that don't know that. They just think that the Department of Education does a whole lot. And they really don't. Well, let's see what happens. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I think like maybe some of the funding, if it goes away, people won't like it. But I think it's supposed to still go to the states, or if they could move it to a different department. But I'm guessing you're not going to see that much of a difference because it didn't really do a whole lot. And if you give teachers more creativity, uh, they can teach. I think the scores are going to go up. Like I said, in the last 50 years since the Department of Education have been around, scores have gone down. It's because teachers are teaching to the test. They have a script, like you said, and they're not allowed to be creative in how they teach. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of disrupting the system. I'm not an anarchist or anything, but
Same. Well, we wouldn't be a country, we'd still be part of England if we didn't even start that way. So, there's that.
but I'm a fan of just shaking things up and seeing because if something's not working, then you need to try something else. And I think that again, we need to have some long-term thinking here and realize that what we're seeing, yes, it does affect a lot of people, the people who have lost their jobs, teachers, but at the same time, that is the immediate effect. I think that there are going to be long-term solutions to help solve those problems. And the people who are saying that they're afraid that, well, equity, like the students who need the most support aren't going to get that support, and so on and so forth. I mean, I just I wish I know that in my case, the school that I'm at, not necessarily. Let me just give you an example. Okay, so there's in my parish, past year they shut down several of the public schools. They shut them down because they were not doing well. All right, and they switched them over to charter schools. And on Indeed, if you went and looked for the jobs, they're paying teachers $73,000, okay, a year. That's their salary. Compared to the starting salary in my area is 48,000, okay? And those teachers are at these charter schools, or this one in particular, are supposed to be 73,000. But throughout the year, you have seen these jobs open up over and over and over again because it's run by a company, and you're just fired at will as a teacher. But what I've heard about this school is that it has they have assistant principals in every grade level who sit in on your classrooms. They don't have any tests, no standardized tests somehow. Um, but just all these things that if I went on and on, when I look at it, it's not education. To me, it is not education. The public education, and those are the students who are at risk.
Mm.
So we're talking about the system that we're currently in, and a lot of students still not getting what they need. And so when I talk about disrupting the system,
Hmm.
I think that it's worth a shot. It's worth trying something different because, from my experience and what I've seen, students are not getting the education they need, and especially those students who are disadvantaged, who have special needs. A lot of times, they still aren't getting the services that they need at those schools that are like that. So,
Definitely, yes. So the school that was paying 73,000, that was a charter school, you said?
yes, charter school.
Okay, and you're saying that at that school the kids weren't getting what they needed?
Um, well, from what I've heard, because I've had people, I know people that work there,
Mm-hmm.
and they've described what it is like. They're very militaristic,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. Um, kids eat lunch in the classrooms. This is, I believe, K through eighth, if not
Okay.
12th. But yeah, just a lot of things that I would not describe. Everything, the classroom, everything is on a timer.
Mm-hmm.
Just things like that.
Is it optional, or for, like, do the parents, since it's a charter school, the parents can choose to send their kid there, or just trying to understand the school?
I believe so. I believe so. I
Okay.
mean, I don't really know all the circumstances other than what happened was there were so many schools in the district that got shut down because they were underperforming, and what they did is they took a few of those schools and reworked them into charter schools.
Okay.
So, but
So then, at least if the parents have a choice, or if there was school choice in the state, then they could go, okay, I don't like how militaristic this is. I'm going to go somewhere else. And maybe some parents would be like, great, I want my kid in a military type school. But
right,
gives a lot
right.
of choice. And same with teachers, some kind of environment and some wouldn't. So, although the 73,000, if your state's paying 46, I'm sure would be very tempting, no matter what you thought of it.
Um,
Yeah.
and let me just to clarify because I know more about the school that I'm at, and I didn't want to say this, and I'm not going to name the school or anything, but I'll just put it like this. To me, and I've told my students this, I didn't become a teacher to stand in a classroom and have students work on computer programs all day long. But that is what I have seen this year. And to me, it's not education. I was inspired to be an English or a reading teacher because of the opportunities, the experiences that I had growing up in my English class when we made a poetry booklet. We had to write poetry and create a booklet and present it to the class, or just different group projects that we had, and things that helped me find and fostered a love of learning and a
Right.
love of literature. I don't know how you can foster a love of learning in students when you're working on one computer program that is, whatever, and then they're working on another computer program. And you may know, for example, programs like Zern, um, iReady, Lexia, just these
Yeah.
other self learning. But I would argue that I have seen students work on these programs more than 50% of the time. And so
Mm.
when we're talking about the quality of education and students not getting things that they need, resources, and things like that, I look and I see a lot of things like that going on in my area, not just my school, but my area and my state.
Yeah.
And I say, it's worth changing things up. It's worth doing something different and allowing more opportunities, because I do feel for those students who are very, very intelligent. For some reason, they're at these schools and they're not getting the education that they could get, but
Mm-hmm.
through school choice, because they're bored doing these kinds of things. They're not getting that experience, and so I'm down for something different.
Yeah, I am too. Let it shake up. And I don't know why. So they've gotten away from this, I guess because it discludes, but they used to group kids, kind of like all the gifted kids go together so they could kind of work on their level, and they don't like to group kids like that anymore. And I think it's kind of sad, because why not group the gifted kids together and let them do some higher thinking? They're going to be ahead of the rest of the class, or pull them out. Um, you know, I think kids feel
That
singled out.
that goes back to something we talked about, of the value of education going down.
Hmm.
Because what it is, the argument for that is that having gifted kids in having all the kids in the same classroom or whatever, the gifted kids will lift up, those kids who need that extra push. The gifted kids serve as sort of peer tutors, and research has proven that that is true.
Okay.
However, again, if you put gifted kids together in a classroom, they also push each other up, and that is an opportunity for them. So yes, a lot of the practices we see, and I guess you could call that DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. It has lowered the value of education for some. It has lifted some up while pulling some down.
Right, because I would think, like, yeah, they're lifting everybody else up, but who's lifting them up? Then they're, if they don't have other people to challenge them.
Right. And
Yeah,
they get mixed in with students who might not have the best behavior and things like that, because there is a correlation between behavior and grades, so, or student
definitely.
achievement. So yes, there has been a push really to push some students up, but it has lowered, by the byproduct is just a lowering overall.
Right. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say about this topic that before we end, that we haven't already discussed?
Like I said in the beginning, I think that this is an exciting time to be an educator. Um, just because the news is out there, there's a lot going on, and it's interesting to see what the future might hold and what could happen. And I could see potentially some of those teachers who have, written off education, saying, "Let me give it one more try."
Yes, yes. And I was going to say that too. Like, any teacher who's lost their job or is afraid of losing their job, there's a teacher shortage. You'll find a job, don't worry, somewhere else if you want to keep teaching. Or, there are many online teaching jobs you can do as well. So I would not worry. There's plenty of teaching jobs out there. Well, Holden, thanks for coming on my channel. He's got his channel is Classroom Camp, which I left it in the description, I've got a link to his channel. He talks about different news stories, teachers in the news. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate it. This was a lot
Okay.
of fun.
Yes, it was. No problem. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. See you next time.